The girl's voice was innocent, but her words made the billionaire's blood cold. My mom has a ring just like yours. He froze, his mind racing. That ring, one of a kind, had been lost decades ago. Impossible. Who was this girl? And why did her mother have something that should never have left his family? As he looked into her eyes, a terrifying possibility took shape, one that would shatter everything he thought he knew. Had his past finally caught up with him? For billionaire Richard Langley, life had always been predictable. Power, wealth, and a name that commanded respect. His days were filled with high-stakes meetings, luxury, and carefully guarded secrets. But none of that prepared him for when a young girl stood before him, her wide eyes filled with innocence, and uttered words that sent a chill through his spine. It had been just another charity gala, another night of polite conversations and empty gestures. Richard had been shaking hands, smiling for cameras, until the girl appeared. Her presence was unexpected, but her arrival didn't unsettle him. It was the simple statement she made that cracked open a past he had buried long ago. Because the ring she spoke of was never meant to be found again. Richard's heart pounded as he stared at the girl. She couldn't have been older than 10, her curly hair framing a face full of innocence. Yet her words had sliced through him like a blade. My mom has a ring just like yours. It wasn't possible. The ring on his finger, an heirloom passed through generations of Langleys, was one of a kind. It had been custom made for his family. His mind raced, grasping for a logical explanation, but there was none. His gaze drifted to the woman standing behind the girl, a black woman with weary eyes, her expression unreadable. Something about her felt familiar. Richard swallowed hard. "Who is your mother?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm building inside him. The girl beamed. "She's right here." The woman stepped forward, and the world tilted beneath him in that instant. He knew her. He knew her. Decades peeled away in his mind, back to a time when he was a younger man, careless, entitled, before his wealth had hardened him. A time when he had made choices he never looked back on. Memories flashed like lightning, the summer before he left for law school. A secret relationship was hidden from the world, promises whispered in the dark, and then the betrayal. The cruel decision that had changed everything. His pulse thundered in his ears as he looked at the woman. It couldn't be her. But it was. The mother of this child, the woman standing before him, was the same woman he had abandoned all those years ago. And if her daughter had a ring just like his, then she kept a secret that could destroy everything he thought he knew about his past. Richard's breath hitched as the truth struck him like lightning. His gaze flickered between the woman and the girl, his mind refusing to accept the reality unfolding before him. This child, her child, was his. The room spun, the weight of the years, of choices made in arrogance and cruelty, crashed down on him. He had walked away from her mother, left her to fend for herself in a world that had never been kind to her. He had never looked back, and never wondered what had become of her. And now, standing before him, was living proof of the past he had erased. The woman, Sophia, held his gaze, her expression calm but laced with something profound, something raw. "You don't even remember, do you?" she asked, her voice steady, but her eyes burned with the pain of years gone by. Richard opened his mouth, but no words came. Her voice sharpened. "You left me. You knew what the world was like for a girl like me, pregnant with your child, alone. And you still left." The whispers around them grew louder. People were watching, murmuring. their curiosity turning into judgment. A billionaire, powerful, untouchable, was now exposed before them. Richard felt the walls closing in. The ring on his finger felt heavier than ever, symbolizing everything he had inherited: privilege, legacy, and now shame. Still unaware of the storm between them, the girl smiled up at him. "Do you know my dad?" she asked innocently. Richard's heart clenched, because now, for the first time, he had to face a question he had never prepared for. Would he finally claim the past he had abandoned, or walk away again? Richard stood frozen, staring at the girl who bore his blood, yet knew nothing of him. The weight of his past choices pressed on his chest like a stone. He had spent his life building wealth, ensuring his name carried power. But what was it worth if he had abandoned the one thing that truly mattered? Sophia's eyes searched his, waiting for an answer. But what could he say? That he had been young? That the world had taught him to value status over love, power over responsibility? None of it would erase the years she had struggled alone. None of it would change that he had left his daughter to grow up without a father. And yet, in the girl's innocent gaze, there was no hate, no bitterness, only curiosity. A chance. Slowly, Richard reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of his family ring, the same one Sophia had described. The same one now bound him to a truth he could no longer ignore. He slid it off his finger, holding it in his palm for a moment before extending it toward the child. "This belonged to my father," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And now, I think it should belong to you." Sophia's breath caught. The girl's eyes widened, her small hands trembling as she reached for the ring. For Richard, this was only the beginning. He could never erase the past, but he could choose the future. He could be more than the man who had walked away. Because absolute power isn't measured by wealth, but by the courage to make things right. How many others had been abandoned, discarded by a world deemed unworthy? How many children had grown up without knowing their true history? And, more importantly, how many more would be lost before we finally change? If you enjoyed this story and thought it provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful narratives. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? Your support helps bring more eye-opening stories to life.